Okay, so Trump may have or may not have gone to Gaza. It may or may not be the Monaco, or even better than that. But what does this mean for the Middle East policy of the two candidates? That's the big discussion. Professor Andrew Latham, Jonna Blank, as well as Alex Zdan joins me on the broadcast to talk about the three aspects and essentially the three views on this discussion. Let me start with the Republican strategist first. Alex, there are conflicting reports that Donald Trump even went to Gaza. He says he did. The United Nations said he didn't. And there are some reports that indicate maybe he's talking about Israel. Maybe several people listening to this flip-flop would be a tad bit worried about Trump administration and its Middle East policy.
Well, I would say to you that no matter where President Trump visited when he was president, and he did go to the West Bank as part of a larger swing through the Middle East in 2017, former President Trump has a record on the Middle East, and it's a positive one. When you look at the Abraham Accords, which normalized relations between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain, and later also Morocco, this was something that did a lot to promote peace within the Middle East. That continued even in the latter part of his presidency and when he left office. And if an analysis is proven to be correct, a lot of the reasons that Hamas and Iran felt that they needed to strike Israel on October 7th was because powers in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, the Sunni powers, were moving closer and closer to Israel. There were potential deals in the works to improve relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Flights from Saudi Arabia to Israel had begun. So Donald Trump's record in the Middle East is one of peace and positivity. And that's what he will be pursuing if he returns to the White House in January.
Okay, so as I said, the topic of discussion is not whether he went to Gaza or West Bank or Israel or whatever. But the fact is that what is his policy, what is his vision, and what was his record the first time he was in office. And Mr. Blank, respond to what the Republican strategist said, that at the end of the day, the accords that he spoke about did happen during Donald Trump's first tenure.
Yes, that's correct. I think we're all in agreement about whether Donald Trump is fully in line with Netanyahu's vision for the region. He is, and I don't think there's any discussion on that point. What gets left out of the equation is the 7 million Palestinians whom both Donald Trump and Netanyahu wish just didn't exist, or at least did not exist where they currently live. Could Gaza become Monaco? I doubt it, but it definitely could not become Monaco with 2 million Palestinians living as war-torn refugees under a brutal military dictatorship, or a military occupation. And that's the vision for the region that both Donald Trump and Netanyahu have for the future.
Professor Andrew, where do you see those two candidates as far as their Middle East policy is concerned? Kamala Harris's campaign has been in the past scanty in terms of her vision specifically, but she's come out with some in the last couple of weeks. Where do you see that and compare that to Donald Trump's?
Well, I think rather than looking at the two candidates, we need to look at the DNA of the two parties and the way in which they are oriented towards this part of the world. And it's clear to me that the Democrats have a vision which is about, I hate to use the word appeasing, but appeasing Iran as a cornerstone of a regional peace settlement. Whereas Donald Trump and the Republicans have a very different vision, which is containing Iran through the Abraham Accords, for example. Neither of these two visions take seriously the plight of the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank. And that has been convenient for both parties, in fact, until October 7th of last year, to write them out of the equation and simply pursue their different visions of how to achieve peace and stability in the region. But October the 7th has upset that particular apple cart. And now people are going to have to, both parties in the U.S. are going to have to come to grips in a serious way with the future of the Palestinian people in a world in which neither the Palestinians nor the Israelis really welcome the prospect of a two-state solution.
Professor Andrew, then let me ask you this. This is a question I would ask you and not any of the two other panelists because they represent one of the two political views. Either of these two candidates will be president-elect in less than a month, and they will then decide what would be the United States' future policy. And where do you see that leading the world to? Because at the end of the day, that will have a very large bearing on how this entire conflict gets resolved or at least gets addressed.
Yeah, this conflict is not going to be resolved in the short to medium term. It's going to be managed. And I don't see either of these two parties being well positioned in terms of domestic politics, but in terms of the vision of the people they might bring into their administrations to even manage this conflict very well. I think we can point to the track record of Donald Trump, of whom I am not a big fan, by the way, but I think his administration really made some progress back in the day.
Okay.
It's unclear, because it's unclear about Vice President Harris's take on these things, but I think the people that she'll bring to the table do share that, I think now, outdated view that placating or appeasing Iran is the way forward.
Respond to that, Mr. Blank, that a lot of what Democrats' views, which are actually not policy, but more about an appeasement approach in terms of Iran.
Yes, I really disagree with the characterization of Democrats' approach to Iran as appeasement. That's very much not the policy that Barack Obama or President Joe Biden have put in place when in office, and it's not what Kamala Harris intends to put in place. She explicitly said in an interview just this week that she considers Iran to be the foremost adversary of the United States. Let me make clear, I disagree with a lot of Democratic positions, particularly on Gaza and the Middle East. But let's be accurate about what is being put forward. The Democratic strategy towards Iran is one of containment. The Republican strategy, at least as it appears to me, is one of unstrategic military engagement. There really isn't a strategy for a long-term dealing with Iran. Iran's nuclear program was put in a box by President Barack Obama, and Donald Trump reneged on the agreement, and now Iran is closer than ever to a nuclear weapon.
Alex, this is a very complex and complicated security calculus. But respond to what many in the Democrat camp have been saying, and they've been saying it publicly, that Donald Trump's campaign and policy doesn't get a handle on how complicated the situation is, and more importantly, how he could be, in fact, pushing Iran closer to getting a nuclear weapon.
Well, first, I will say that this is an incredibly complex situation, and that no president or presidential candidate in our lifetimes has been able to articulate a process and a policy that would fix this problem overnight. No one can do it. It's going to be a long struggle to achieve peace in that region, and peace should always be the end goal. The question is, how do we get there? I think the professor made some excellent points about Democrats' relationship with Iran. Iran is a malignant actor in this region and needs to be contained aggressively. That's what former President Trump did in office. Let's not forget, killing Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, who was the chief exporter of terrorism on the planet. He's no longer around because Donald Trump took decisive action, took out Soleimani, and the Iranian response was muted.
Quick closing comments, Professor Andrew. You're wearing the hat of being the strategist and not to any of the parties. Quick closing comments about how do you think this is panning out, and more importantly, how big an issue this is in these elections?
Well, I don't think it's a hugely consequential issue in this particular presidential election in the United States. Maybe on college campuses it is, but beyond that, not so much. I would echo some of the comments about from my colleagues that this is a situation that has to be managed in the short term and can only be resolved in the medium to long term, if it can be resolved at all. I personally think that Iran is a malignant actor in the region, that there is no deal to be done with Iran. And although I don't like the terms containment or appeasement because they are specific to a particular historical moments, Iran needs to be blunted. and its malignant influence needs to be blunted.
Okay.
And there is no deal to be done with Iran in the short term.